as you all know, I was an elections lawyer. Every election that I've ever encountered has had problems. There are no perfect elections because they're run by people and people are stupid. In a lot of elections, there are nefarious hanky-panky. Never amounts to much, but it's not like it doesn't happen. But I do not think, and I know some of you do, I do not think that the 2020 election was stolen per se. I certainly don't think the Dominion voter system machines were in some way rigging the vote for Joe Biden. And I keep hearing theories of massive numbers of dead people who voted and ballots that were registered and shouldn't have been registered. And I don't actually see any real evidence. I see a lot of people saying that stuff. I don't see the evidence. And people keep telling me, well, go look here. And I look there and there's nothing there. Regardless of whether you think the election was stolen or not. And I don't. I do think something happened. And my frustration, my large frustration all along has been that so many people have been looking in the non-existent places. They haven't looked in the real places. So many people have wanted to focus on allegedly pristine ballots that were cast that no one can find, or voting machines that threw the election for Joe Biden. There was a situation down in South Georgia where I think it was Ware County, where someone alleged that the machines had actually thrown the vote. And I called the Board of Election. They said that wasn't what happened at all, that actually the machines got it right. The hand count was wrong. They had to go back and redo the hand count. There's lots of, someone knows someone who saw something inappropriate and the like, and everybody gets distracted by all of these things with the voter machines or supposed suitcases full of ballots and the like, and they've missed what actually happened. And we have to talk about what actually happened because I'm afraid it's going to happen again because of an unrelated story that is highly related. Here's what actually happened. It wasn't voting machines throwing the election. It wasn't Hugo Chavez's ghost with the Iranians. It wasn't the Italians. It wasn't the Defense Department black ops, and it wasn't the deep state. It was the lawyers. See, what happened was that the election was not stolen. The Democrats were able to get the rules changed before the election. That's what actually happened. And no one's ever really wanted to pay attention to this because you had the hucksters and the fraudsters and the Sidney Powell idiots out there with their Kraken distracting everybody, claiming there was real evidence for things that there was no real evidence for, and everybody has ignored what really happened. And what really happened should bother you, but it was not illegal, and it was not theft. It was better lawyering. The Republicans used to have the best election lawyers in the country. But those Republican lawyers who were really good, they didn't like Trump, and Trump didn't like them. So he sidelined some of them, and the others said they didn't want to help him. But the Democrats had a really crack team of lawyers. And essentially, you don't go to a podiatrist when you've got cardiology problems. You don't go to a neurologist when you've got the problems you need to go to a proctologist for. And you don't go to an ENT when you've got ED. You go to the appropriate doctor. With the law, it's the same way. You don't go to a DUI lawyer to fight an election case. And that's essentially what the Trump team did. The Trump team went with a bunch of plaintiffs and DUI lawyers who aren't actually election lawyers and didn't go with election lawyers. Now, I'll be brief with this. There are nuances to election law, and I used to be one. I really did. So, for example, all of the people who come to me and say, well, there were only like 11,400 votes between Trump and Biden. You throw out 11,400 ballots, means Trump won. No, that's never been the case. You actually have to throw out, 46,500 ballots? Because there were 35,000 people in Georgia who voted in the election who did not vote in the presidential election. And this happens every year. Usually the number's a lot higher. Usually there are a lot of people. So, for example, in 2016 in Georgia, almost 100,000 people refused to vote in the presidential race between Clinton and Trump. Between Trump and Biden, it was only about 35,000. So when people say, well, you just got to throw out those 11,000 whatever votes there were, no, actually, you got to deal with the 35,000 as well, because under election law, you can't presume someone voted for a candidate. And so to be able to challenge the election, you got to throw out not just the base level gap between the two candidates, but also the gap of people who didn't even participate in that election, which was 35,000. Got to throw out that many ballots. And that's just Georgia. And then you have to go state by state by state by state. And see, the DUI lawyers and the plaintiffs' lawyers who decided to represent Trump had no knowledge of that. Most of you, I bet, didn't realize that. That's actually the law of all 50 states. There's a mathematical formula you have to use in order to throw out an election based on a discrepancies enough to change the outcome of the election. And it's that mathematical formula is you take the difference between the votes in the race in particular and add it to the number of people who chose not to participate in that race altogether. So it's about 45,000 votes you got to throw out, not 11,000. And people don't realize that. The problem is the Democrats went to court with really good election lawyers, and the Trump team's really good election lawyers didn't want to work for Trump, or Trump didn't want them to work for him. So he went with the Sidney Powells of the world, who may be a good lawyer, but she's not an elections lawyer. You can be a really good plaintiff's lawyer. You can be a damn good DUI lawyer. Doesn't make you a good election lawyer. Election law is very nuanced. So here's what happened. The president's team had to go to court on defense, because Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security during COVID issued regulations about dealing with COVID and how to conduct a free and fair election in the age of a global pandemic. And they authorized or recommended states do things like ballot drop boxes. You might have heard of them. Or absentee ballot programs, or showing a little more leeway with absentee ballots. Those were the things the Trump White House recommended through the Department of Homeland Security, how to deal with a global pandemic. We hadn't had an election during a global pandemic since, 1916. Nobody now was alive back then who has any memory of doing an election. So they came out with all these rules. So what did the Democrats do? Well, the Democrats went to court. They went to court in Georgia. They went to court in Nevada. They went to court in Arizona. They went to court in Pennsylvania. They went to court in Wisconsin. They went to court all over the country, and they got federal judges, not state judges. They got federal judges to alter the rules of the state's elections to make it easier to vote. One of the things they did, and it appears they may have done it in Georgia, is they went around and they collected ballots. Ballot harvesting is technically illegal. Here's the problem that people don't understand. Is the ballot is still lawfully cast. So in Georgia right now, there is credible evidence the Secretary of State is investigating whether or not Democrats did ballot harvesting. That is, they went to people who had absentee ballots and said, hey, we know you're going to vote. Give us your ballot. If the ballots can't be intercepted before they make it into the pool of votes, the ballots themselves get counted and the ballot harvesters go to jail. The vote is not thrown out. The ballot harvesters are thrown in jail because the vote is paramount. The vote is sacrosanct. So you find all the ballot harvesters and they admit they harvested all the ballots. You can't throw out the election. And even if you could throw out the election, you can't get rid of Joe Biden. Once he's inaugurated, you can't remove him from office except by impeachment. Trump's not coming back, except through another election in 2024. People don't understand these nuances of election law. The Democratic lawyers understood these things. So the Democratic lawyers went in advance, got the rules changed based on the White House Homeland Security document for how to conduct elections. They were able to get drop boxes. They were able to get permissive absentee ballots. They were able to do ballot harvesting. They were able to do a lot of things that judges allowed them to do. And in some cases, it was Trump-appointed judges. And the reason in almost every single case is because the Republicans hired the worst possible lawyers to go to court and argue the case. There actually was a plaintiff's lawyer, like ambulance-chasing plaintiff's lawyer. It was one of Trump's lawyers to argue about this stuff. Another really was a DUI lawyer. While the Democrats went in with election experts and election lawyers and were able to convince the judges because these other Republican lawyers, they didn't know election law. Election law takes time to learn. You can learn the basics, but the basics don't get you very far. You wind up reading the statutes and you ignore the underlying case law of how the case law interprets the statutes. So the Democrats gamed the system in March, April, May, June, and July of 2020. So by the time November rolled around, they were able to write the rules. John Dingell was the dean of the House for a very long time. He was a elderly senior Democrat from Michigan, and he had a great saying. If you write the law and I write the rules, I'm going to win every time. And his point was, if you allow John Dingell to control how a piece of law goes through the House of Representatives, John Dingell is going to win because he's going to write the rules. And the Democrats won in 2020 in large part because they wrote the rules. Yes, there was dissatisfaction, broad dissatisfaction with Donald Trump. He still probably could have won in a number of these states, except the Democrats got judges to allow them to accept the Trump Department of Homeland Security recommendations, and they changed the existing laws on the ground. Now, this is a really important component of that. The Republicans never matched the ground game. Once the Democrats got the rules changed, the Republicans huffed and puffed about their loss and didn't get off their butts and change things. So the Democrats were able to outmaneuver them the whole time, and Joe Biden won. You can disagree with me, but I'm right. You can claim other issues. You can claim the machines. You can claim all sorts of stuff. We can agree to disagree on that, but you got to focus on what I'm telling you. And the reason is because there's another COVID wave coming. It's a successor variant to Omicron. It's hitting Europe and it's hitting Asia right now. Half the flights today at Heathrow Airport have been canceled because they don't have enough pilots and crew because of the current wave of COVID blowing through. It's going to hit the United States. It may already be here. We're in primary season. And I'm telling you, the Democrats are going to run this playbook all over again. The Democrats are going to go get expedited, rewritten, revised rules for the 2022 election season based on what happened in 2020 in the name of trying to carry out an election during a global pandemic. And I think the Republicans are so distracted by Dominion voter system machines, they're not prepared to actually mount a challenge to the Democrats when they come calling with the rules. We will be caught flat-footed again, all because we decided to focus on the improbable and the crazy and not the things the Democrats were actually doing. At least our saving grace may be the wave is so big in November, but also the election lawyers who sat on the sidelines in 2020 are back in action this time, and they happen to be very good.